Welcome to Jim White's webinar series. Jim has been investing, coaching executives, and turning around companies for over 30 years. Now your host, Dr. Jim White.
Hello, this is Jim White. It is June the 2nd, 2020. And welcome to part 4 of my critical thinking series. I was thinking just before we went live, wow, what a week, right? What a week. And we will probably dig in that a little bit more as we go through the session this evening. But once again, thank you for joining us this evening. And let's just do a quick review of last week's session. And last week we discussed 4 major steps of logical thinking. And as you recall, they were, number 1, asking the right questions, organizing data, evaluating the information, and drawing conclusion. All of those things are absolutely critical and the logical steps of critical thinking. This is something that I think we as a nation should be doing more of right now, right? Every news channel is, every time I flip through one of the major, we've got some event occurring in some major part of the U.S. and also international as well. So we need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and start doing some critical thinking, right? So once again, thank you for joining me. And as always, I like to go through the objectives. And a lot of people ask me from time to time, Jim, why do you tell us the same thing over and over and over, right? Well, I often refer to that as tell them what you're going to tell them, and again, it's always that over communication. So once again, the objectives for this series when we decided to move forward was to understand the components of critical thinking and to utilize non-linear thinking, use logical thinking, which we started last week, and recognize what it means to be a critical thinker. And that's going to be a big focus on our session this evening. Evaluate your information using critical thinking skills and identify the benefits of critical thinking. And revise perspective when necessary. And I think that bullet alone is worth the price of admission this evening, right? For all of us to sit back and revise perspective. And it is certainly necessary, in my opinion, to do that this evening, not only in the United States, but around the nation as well. And then comprehend problem-solving abilities. As I look at this content, and I started developing this content many years ago, and I don't think it could be any more relevant today as it was a few years back. So comprehend problem-solving abilities. Well, this week we're going to drill down, and we're going to have 2 parts of this session. It's called what I call critical thinker, and I named it number 1. Critical thinker number 1. And what are some of the characteristics of critical thinkers, right? If we can learn those characteristics of critical thinkers, I think it would be well that some of our politicians, not only in Washington and throughout the United States and around the world, could put some of these abilities to work right now. So what are some of the characteristics of critical thinkers? Well, like I said, based on recent events, man, it would be great if we could get some of that to start showing up, right? And do they have innate abilities that make them better at critical thinking, if I can speak of this evening? So we're talking about what is critical thinking and what are some of the characteristics, right? That's what we're talking about. And with those characteristics, do they make you better at critical thinking? And I think yes, and I hope you're going to agree with me as we go through the session this evening and as we continue our sessions for the week to come. Now, through this week and next week's session, we will end up evaluating 8 characteristics of critical thinkers. This week, we're going to drill down on four this week. Now, the four that we're going to look at is, number one, it's called active listening. And once again, I know I'm going to be redundant, so bear with me and give me a little wide berth, if you will, and if you will, please. Active listening, man. We got to start listening, right? We got to start listening as a nation. We got to start doing a better job listening with our spouses. We got to start listening to our friends. We got to start listening to our neighbors. We got to start listening. I mean, listening. And we got to hear, listening and hear. We got to hear some of the tragic events that unfolded a few days ago. Is happens way too often. So again, I'm going to do everything that I can not to turn this into a political tirade, but sometimes I cannot help but kind of step over the line a little bit, because I just absolutely breaks my heart to see what's playing out in front of us today. So the four characteristics: active listening, curiosity, right? Curiosity is a big thing, right? Remember, as a child, being curious. We want our children to be curious. As adults, we should be curious. I am curious about everything, every subject, every matter. There's not a subject that I really don't enjoy. So curiosity. And another one we're going to discuss and dig down deeper on this evening is self-discipline. Self-discipline. That's one that is absolutely so valuable. And I hope that as the protesters and in the United States, we have the right to do that, as long as we do it peacefully and with respect, and with not harming or destroying other people's property, right? We have that right. That's what makes this country so wonderful. So through this critical thinking process, we've got to employ self-discipline. And the last bullet that we're going to discuss, and the last topic we're going to discuss this evening, is going to be humility. Well, I think we could use more of that as well. More humility. Humility will go a long way. Now, you know my favorite word by now. It's drilled down on the number one bullet that we saw: active listening. Let's take a deeper dive into that. We've all heard it before. The best communicators are active listeners. And active listeners must develop the art of hearing as well, right? What does it mean to practice active listening? Excuse me. What does it mean to practice active listening? Active listening means that the listener is completely engaged. Are you engaged in your dialogue with your spouse, with your employees, with your grandkids or kids? And are we engaged to the community? I'm going to say right now, we're not. Active listening means the listener is completely engaged with what the speaker is communicating and judging what is being said. Now, I use that word judging to kind of probably spark you a little bit, right? Judging what is being said, and to do all the things to determine fact from fiction, right? The listener is not formulating his or her rebuttal or response to the speaker, or even worse, thinking about something else unrelated. So it's engaged. First, to be able to communicate, we've got to give one your undivided attention. And last week we talked about biases, right? And that goes hand in hand with active listening and not formulating and making a judgment, right? Active listening is such an important skill, and it is a skill. It's something that you can learn, and that was one of the driving forces behind me deciding to do this series. So active listening is a very important skill. It's not only essential in the workplace, as I said, but it's essential in everyday life with your family and your spouse. Where active listening improves productivity, and it does. Active listening improves productivity and prevents errors. That's one of the things that I'm always talking about in all of our companies, because so many errors are created because we're not listening. We're not active listening, and that creates errors. Errors cost you credibility. Errors get in the way of your career goals. Errors cost the employer money. So active listening absolutely reduces productivity, and it's going to it improves productivity, I just say, excuse me, and it's going to prevent errors. Every service-oriented occupation is based on active listening. Service-oriented occupation is everything. I shouldn't just confine it to service organizations, but everything we do. Additionally, active listening is also a key to happy relationships. Man, this is so important. There's the active listening. Be totally engaged. Listen to what's being said. Listen to what's being said. And I encourage all of our political leaders, the protesters that are on the streets, we must listen to their concerns. We cannot turn them out, turn them away. It's time for us to stand up and start listening. Start listening. And I mean really listening, not giving it lip service. Listen. And I implore all of our employees and all of our friends, start working on active listening, and it's going to improve productivity, and study. So the next thing that we're going to transition into on the Critical Thinker 1 that we're doing this week, as I said in the opening, be curious. Curiosity. I remember, it's like it was just yesterday. I remember I was probably 8 years old, and in rural South Carolina, and we lived on a farm. I was living with my grandparents, and I remember when I saw my first airplane, believe it or not, it's flying across. And I remember my grandfather saying to me, and I hear his words now, and he called me by my initial, JL. And that's when I named our company in honor of him, J.L. White, right? So probably more information you need, but nonetheless, one thing that those words said, be curious. Always be curious, and always know that you can do that one day. So I went on, as I think a lot of you know, I'm going to use the word old pilot, aerobatics, all of those things, curiosity, right? Curiosity is yet another skill in developing your critical thinking. Another great skill. Now, some scholars believe that Socrates' ultimate goal was not so much to advocate his methods, but to advocate self-improvement and spark curiosity. Our job as leaders, as parents, is to spark curiosity and to help people want to self-improve. We had a question that came in, and the question, if I botched the question, my apology, but I'm going to paraphrase. The question is basically, how do we engage millennials, right? I mean, that was the question, and not suggesting millennials not in question. And the reason I thought about that was you got to engage because curiosity, they got to see a clear vision, and they got to want it. They got to believe you, right? And you got to have trust. You got to have trust. The main goal of any teacher is to spark that curiosity and to engage their students. So I've often said my job is teacher, mentor, and coach. Teacher, mentor, and coach. Oftentimes when I'm speaking to major CEOs and political leaders, I remind them of what our job is. Our job is to teach. Our job is to inspire. Our job is to spark curiosity. Our job is to do everything that we possibly can to get the barriers out of the way. And hopefully, just one spark with one individual is going to catch on, and it's just going to be so dynamic. It's going to be so powerful as to what we can do within our family unit, in all of our companies, and throughout the nation as well. There are many methods to engage curiosity, but they all essentially involve raising a question. And I've kind of referred to that. For instance, Einstein and all these names, they just been circling in my head the past few days. Einstein prompted his curiosity by asking questions about how matter and energy function. I think we talked last week about asking questions. You got to learn to how to ask questions, right? Ask questions, stimulate curiosity. How does this work? Be curious, look at it, shake it, turn it upside down, be curious, and make sure that we are leading in such a way to inspire people to ask the questions. Now, as I said, throughout history, we can certainly see how curiosity and an open mind contributes to success. Well, right now, the history that we are creating right now, we're creating history every day. The day is going to be over, it's going to be history, right? So every day, we can see how we are generating curiosity. And open mind contributes to success. Curiosity and open mind. We've got to open our minds. If I could do some magic wand right now in every city through the United States and around the world, I would say it's pull it back, it's open our mind, it's be curious, it's listen to other people, and it's do all we can. Now, it's a two-way street, right? Is to be able to do that. Now, another thing that came to mind when I was preparing for the session for tonight, I thought about Florence Nightingale. Yeah, I did. And when I share a little bit more, and you're probably already saying, yeah, I know the story. And for you that do not, I will share it. She's the mother of modern nursing. I couldn't think of a better person to bring up this evening. COVID-19 and and I'm going to use the word heroes in a very serious way, and the frontline people that are out there as we speak, taking care of people for the COVID-19. She was also a skilled statistician whose open mind and curiosity, it led her to write an important report on the sanitary health of the battlefield. Yeah, how appropriate, in my opinion, that I just remember this and I jotted it down and been looking at it this afternoon. The report went on to lead the British Royal Commission to adopt changes that saved many lives during the Crimean War, right? So all of these stories that should be inspiring us, and all of this from critical thinking, right? And this part of being curious. I don't know if you've ever thought about curiosity the same ever before or ever will, but curiosity curiosity, man, it is the spark. It is the lifeblood, in my opinion, keeping minds active and open and fresh, right? Now, the next thing that we're going to discuss in the Critical Thinker 1 this evening is to be disciplined, right? So I take a deep breath and I think about that. I reflect on it, and my wonderful staff that helps me bring these sessions to you every evening or every Tuesday of recent weeks. I often say before we go live, what are you going to do this evening? And so sometimes I will plan and we will plan, and I will just pivot and do something entirely different. So I'm going to remain disciplined this evening. But where I was going with that is our law enforcement, the people out on the front lines, and with the peaceful protesters. And I'm not naive enough to know that a lot of people that are also protesting are there protesting for another reason. And unfortunately, that is too much hatred and too much. So peaceful protesting and all the people doing saying, hey, we got to listen. There's some issues within our nation that we have got to give serious attention to. So please, everybody remain disciplined, right? Reasoning and rationale are often associated with self-discipline. Reasoning and rationale are often associated with self-discipline. Critical thinking is a self-discipline and self-guided act. I need to say that again. Critical thinking is a self-discipline and self-guided action. Self-discipline and self-guided. Critical thinking, self-discipline and self-guided action. Critical thinking requires the individual to use their own reasoning skills and have the ability to evaluate and reflect. We've already addressed some of that in previous sessions. One important thing to consider is that people who are critical thinkers commonly are also very empathetic. They're very empathetic and aware of their world and aware of their surroundings. They show a commitment to self-development and strive to make their environment a better place. Critical is similar to the word criterion. A criterion is a test, and I know a lot of us know this, or a standard that can be any item that is psychological, moral, or scientific, or practical for that matter. Hence, we can see how critical thinking is related to being disciplined. Discipline usually denotes practicality. That's so important. Let's restate that. Say it again, I should say. Discipline usually denotes practicality. Now, the fourth thing that we want to discuss in our session this evening is be humble. Be humble. Boy, we could use a lot of that. You could use a lot of that. Be humble. Our leaders, come on, it's not about you. Be humble. Be thankful for what we have. Be thankful for this great nation that we live in. Be thankful for the people to your left and your right and your front and the rear. And it's be humble. Humility is defined as the quality of being modest, of opinion, or estimate of one's own importance. Humility is defined as a quality of being modest, of opinion or estimate of one's own importance. Humility is the opposite of arrogance. Humility is the opposite of arrogance. Humility relates to having an open mind, to being receptive to new information or opinions. I cannot stress enough how important it is that all of our leaders, both political and business and influencers, will hopefully, I would love to be able to be talking to everybody in the nation, around the world, about how important it is to know that we must be humble and not be arrogant. And humility relates to having an open mind. Have this open mind, hear what's being said, and be receptive to new information or opinions. The critical thinker would have to be modest of their own opinion. Being humble allows you to accept and see information in a way that is not filtered through your ego. Again, I think that's important to repeat. Being humble allows you to accept and see information in a way that is not filtered through your ego. Filtered through your ego. I know over the years, and probably now, a lot of folks may refer to as being arrogant. No. The challenge between humility and some of the issues that I have sometimes is seeing people to waste their life and not doing enough to grow and to be curious, but just get in this rut. Man, that drives me absolutely bonkers, right? Now, traditionally, the concept of humility in business and politics has been nearly non-existent. Boy, I'm going to get a lot of feedback on that statement, right? How can a business succeed, one may ask, in a competitive environment if the leaders take a humble or modest approach? Now, that is a big statement. How can a business, or in this case, it's this insert, how can a politician, how can a business succeed in a competitive environment if the leaders take the humble or modest approach? Well, research have identified and coined a term to explain the place of humility in business. It's called neo-humility, N-E-O, humility. This term indicates a type of humility without weakness. Humility without weakness. Just because you're humble doesn't mean that you're weak. Just because you listen and you want to see the other side does not mean you're weak. Nor does arrogance and not being humble, but being this strong arm doesn't mean you have strength. It means that you're weak, right? This term indicates a type of humility without weakness. That's a big one. Now, while it is confidence, and often say to my team, and when I was doing more consulting and more speaking and more workshops, I used to walk in like own the room, right? Have confidence. And who's going to believe you if you show up and you're all shriveled and your head's down? Stand up, be strong, be confident. How is it confidence that help business people introduce new products or ideas? While it is confidence that helps business introduce new ideas or products, while it is confidence that allows politicians to introduce new bills and policies, it is humility that prevents the confidence from spilling over into arrogance. And we got way too much of that, in my opinion. It is humility that prevents the confidence from spilling over into arrogance. Now, of the traits that commonly lead to failure, now this is big. Of the traits that commonly lead to failure, arrogance is one of the downfalls. Arrogance. It will be the downfall of many political leaders. Arrogance, believe me, it will. It's just a matter of time. Arrogance will be the downfall. Arrogance will be the downfall. We have people that are billionaires. We have people that, I'm not going to start naming names, but I think you could probably, as we're sharing some time right now, start thinking about the arrogance. And sometimes you think you got all the money in the world. I'm a billionaire. I have $20 billion. I got $50 billion. So therefore, I can be just be as arrogant, but it will eventually catch up with you. Now, I'm going to use the word blind over assurance can lead to taking unnecessary risk. So there's a balance. So when you have confidence, and if you get and if you become too arrogant, it's going to be a downfall. But if you have blind over assurance, it will lead to taking unnecessary risks, right? So those are the four. Now, like I said, there's 8 characteristics. I thought doing all 8 in one session would be way too much. And I hope I'm right. I think it was way too much. So next week, we're going to do another session. I'm going to call it Critical Thinking 2, and that's going to be on June 9th, right? So what we're going to do there, we're going to drill down, give you a little preview. We're going to drill down on what I call seeing the big picture. That's a big one. Love that one. And we're going to talk about objectivity, and we're going to talk about using your emotions, and we're going to talk about being self-aware. That's all next week. There's a few other things that we're going to be doing, and we're going to be posting this on social media. We're going to be looking at maybe giving away one of my books, Opportunity Investing. There's a program and incentive that our great team has put together. Then also, I think you have shared with you that I have my next book that we're going to be releasing. I was planning on releasing it in July. I think with the environment, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm probably going to kick it out probably right after Labor Day. It's called The Next Big Thing in Politics. So we're going to be doing that, and we'll keep you informed of that. And we're going to be doing more as we're leading up to the elections in November. This is a very critical election year. So, as always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate that you would just indulge me in these sessions, and I cannot thank you enough for all your support. So with that, I'm going to say good evening, be safe, and let's just make sure that we start listening to other people. So until next week, be safe, good evening.
Thank you for your participation and interest in Jim White's webinar series. To stay in touch with Jim, go to www.authorjimwhite.com.